Hello and welcome to the Death Chicks. I'm Myste Lyn and I'm here with co-host Patty Burgess, and this is part of our Hospice series. We're very glad that you've come. We admire your courage for stepping up and facing what we'll all have to do one day. Death is going to happen to each of us. It's going to happen to our loved ones. It's going to happen to our pets. It's going to happen to friends of friends. Family, extended family. It happens all around, and for some reason as a society we tend to put on the blinders a little bit, and Patty and I are here to make some changes in this area. So as the Death Chicks, we invite everyone to tune into the show, become informed, and to die well. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Patty.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Misty. I really, really appreciate it. We're so excited to have Nina Angela Mckissock here today, and she has been a registered nurse for 39 years, and she's the author of From Sun to Sun, and it's a beautiful book that follows 21 of her patients through their hospice journey. Now, just so you know, this book is not religious. There's no dogma. And most noticeably, and I think this is amazing, there is no fear. And it's odd to find that when we're talking about death that there isn't any fear with most of us. But her book is an open-minded reflection about the mysteries of life and death. And when Nina cares for her patients and their families until they die, she shares that they teach her much about life and living. And isn't that the recurring theme about life and living? That when we're involved with death, we're also really connected to life. So Nina was also featured on the Spirituality Channel's 3-part television series From Hospice to Heaven, and she also created a hospital-based program on death and dying and bereavement. She was the executive director and founder of Serenity House on hospice support in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and prior to that, working at Serenity House, she worked as a nurse in the top-rated hospitals, including National Cancer Institute, also Hahnemann University in Philadelphia. And speaking of Philadelphia, that's where Nina and I live. Nina's living here now in Philadelphia and has 3 grown children. So we want to direct you to learn more about Nina. We're going to learn much more in our conversation today, but her glorious book you can get at ninaangelamckissock.com, and we will be posting that information. Actually, it's there already. So Nina, thank you so much for being here. Another Philly girl. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Misty, and thank you, Patty. It's fun being here. It really
Wonderful.
is. Nice. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Well, you know, I had the pleasure of actually meeting you a couple of weeks ago when you gave a talk at Princeton Library, and it was wonderful. And it was wonderful to see how engaged everybody was on this topic. You know, and it was a room full of people. I mean, it had to be 60 or 70 people or more. And so I loved how you, with a lot of humor and with a lot of grace, talked about your particular experiences. And we generally ask people, you know, how did they get started with hospice nursing? Because this is not something that most people start out with right from nursing school. So tell us how you got started.
I was very reluctant. I actually didn't seek the job. My children were 17, 15, and 10, and they were in the massive schlepping stage. And so I just needed a job with better hours, and a home care hospice position opened up. And one of my friends said, you should do it. You can do on-call, you could do per diem. So I said, you know, working with the dying? Oh, please. Because I always came from very high acuity settings. As an ICU float nurse at Hahnemann and on a med-surg floor and this and that, just always fixing people. And so I accepted it. It took me a couple of months not to have my equipment with me, and sometimes when someone died when I wasn't there, I was like, what? But after a while, when I stopped, grasping the fixing idea, and then I was allowed to have the people teach me I was receptive to people teaching me the lesson and their lessons, and then I was able, especially in their homes, to look at their life, and I learned so many things from them. And also my assessment skills were very, very in demand, and the team is so specialized too, a really good team. It's a bunch, you're working with a bunch of ferocious lioness and lions and lionesses, and they are very bright. So I was very fortunate to have those work on those teams.
I guess when you mention lion and lionesses, it's kind of like at that picture of really advocating and really protecting and making sure that these folks are given every availability of living life as full as they can till their last breath. And I know that that's what you do so beautifully. Well, you know, this series that we have here, one of the things that we want to do is make people very aware of what each of the team members do in the hospice team, because it's really this holistic connection of all these different support services. And so are you able to tell us, you know, pretty detailed about the kinds of things that you do in your particular realm and how that interacts with the rest of the team? Like, what do you do when you first meet a hospice patient?
Well, if they're in the hospital and they're referred to either from the palliative care team or to the hospice team, they're getting ready to be discharged. And let's say the doctor has had the discussion with them and they want to return home and live out their life. First, they have to have a 6-month or less diagnosis according to the Medicare guidelines. But again, we have infants, toddlers, teenagers, young people, everyone, and so it's a 6-month or less diagnosis, and also their other insurances will kick in too to cover for the secondary insurance. And so then we will go in, one of the admitting nurses will go in, and the social worker goes in, and they just introduce themselves and tell them exactly what we're able to provide them. And what it is, it's not it isn't a giving up. It's almost as though they're taking a time out. And let's tap the brakes, have a time out, and we will tell them sometimes when you get your symptoms under control, possibly anxiety, constipation, pain, anxiety, it's amazing how the quality of life increases so much. So many people think that it's a form of giving up, and especially sometimes dads think that around their children. But sometimes it's really a sense of getting their symptoms under control and just regrouping. So after we introduce ourselves and then we put the plan into place, we start to really get the durable medical equipment, and if they need a hospital bed, oxygen, whatever equipment they need in the home. The social worker is extremely important and vital in this, to know the family dynamics, because when people are in grief, they know most of these people have had many deaths. The first time they were diagnosed, and then possibly this death of maybe not having expectations again. And so we know that they have been grieving in their own style, and we need to know what they understand. And many times our discussion with the patient is a little bit different or quite different than the one we have with their family members. So that's quite fascinating too. Sometimes people protect one another, and so we've had people standing behind the loved one saying, signaling us off, don't get close to that the cancer word or the death word or anything. So it makes a very stunted conversation. But then we admit them to their home or into the residential hospice if they go there, and we have the plan in place. But there's a lot of support. Our home health aides, our hospice home health aides, they're so wonderful, and I always refer to them because they have the hands-on. They're turning their bodies, listening, watching. There's so much assessment done during a bath, and they have so much very good listening skills also. So there's a home health aide, which you don't get in palliative care. You don't get that at home if you're in palliative care, and then you have a chaplain who is available for any denomination or any kind of spiritual support or questions. I've worked with amazing people, chaplains. I don't even know where they come from. Their minds they're not only brilliant with intellect, but they're brilliant with their heart and their knowledge of all the great books. And then we have the medical director, and people can keep their own doctor too. That's always a relief to them to go back to the doctor they've had for a long time. Then they have the registered nurse, who either sees them once to 7 times a week, depending on the acuity of their illness.
And that's also called the case manager, is that
and
not?
The case manager, yes, and that's the case manager. They manage so many patients per week. Yeah.
Right. So you're really kind of overseeing the care, making the
Yes.
assessment, and then creating this plan of care.
And implementing the plan put in place by the doctor.
And implementing the plan. And then as each week or so goes, you're meeting together so that you can reassess
Yes.
what those needs are of the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the pharmacist is also very involved in it too, so important.
Very,
person.
very good. Absolutely important person. And they talk about, the hospice team being sort of like the pain and symptom management experts, because many times when a person's going for curative care, there's a lot going on and a lot of competing, or what you might call comorbidities. But you're seeing them now at the time where they've made a decision not to go for any more curative care. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's a kind of a flip in mindset as well. Kind of like, I guess you sort of mentioned that, how long did it take you to go from being that fix-it kind of nurse to one who would be there, be present, and be with?
Mm-hmm. Took me about 2 months,
Okay.
I'd say. Yeah. I'm a slow learner. Stubborn.
That's great. That's
No,
great.
it did it. It just and just learning that the greatest gift you could give someone is to sit and listen to them without judging them, because you bring all your stuff, your fears, your stereotypes, your anxieties into every patient or relationship, and also all these patients many times ask you to reopen your old wounds, and sometimes you'll reopen your old wounds 4, 5, 6 times a day, and you have to figure out what they are so you can be of service to people.
That was really well said, Nina. I'm wondering, there was something on your website, I think it's a blog post, and it's titled "That Damn Fear Thing." Would you like to speak to that, which I think you've already started on, and how families, how you as a nurse maybe mitigate that?
Mm-hmm. Every family has a dance that it's choreographed since day one. It isn't up to us to go in there and change it. Our job is to make sure they have freedom of suffering physically and emotionally, and that when they make this leap to wherever they're going after they die, that we make it a leap of grace as much as possible. So first you have to realize that there's so many chemical things going on inside a grieving family too, because you have your cortisol levels are up, and then your adrenals secrete, and so people aren't in their normal mind. There's so much going on. But the fear, I try to, when the timing is good, I try to ask them something about the fear and what it does for them, and why they've chosen this. You have all different kinds of fear. I mean, the fear of suffering, the fear of leaving, the fear of being out of control, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of the financial issues with this, the fear of being ugly, unattractive, unlovable, untouchable. So just little tiny loving ways of dissecting it. And even someone, when they want to end their life, they'll say, "Can't you just make this a little bit quicker for me?" You would say, you don't start, putting a big guilt trip on them, say, "Oh, what will it do to your family? It's a sin, blah, blah, blah." You just start reading about it and talking about it and just researching it almost academically together. And also, in the same time, thinking, you've lived this long. I mean, maybe you just want to live keep on doing this, right? Ride this tornado to the ground, kind of thing. So, but I think the person should have individual rights. But fear comes from so many, has so many depths and layers to the reasons behind fear. So,
do you see some commonalities? Yes, thank you. Do you see some commonalities or some places where this fear arises more readily than others? And any challenges that you have to trying to help people work with that?
Well, it depends on what the fear is. In my book, the first patient I go over is Rick Gallen, and he was a highly decorated Marine, Medal of Honor guy, and he just did not want to be vulnerable, and he didn't want to show his family himself in that kind of position, and so the vulnerability part, and I think a lot of military people, veterans who have been in the trenches, have been trained to deal with their vulnerability, because they're either vulnerable or they're not. It's just one way or the other at all times. And so with Rick, I need to have sort of a strict talk with, not a strict talk, but I kind of did this, not a finger wagging talk, but his family, where he would not allow his family to come into his room. So for a couple of weeks, they kept jumping up whenever we opened the door. So I talked to him about just his body was no longer, there's no distinction between he and his family anymore, or he and his body, and that, who knows where he's going to go, but they have to live on. So perhaps you're giving them the last gift by allowing them to dab your face, allowing their tears to fall on you, allowing them to hold you, even though you don't have to be touched. You may be giving him a gift, and I know that I knew that he could do it, and I knew they wanted it, but I just had to. It was touching my fear of wasting time, and I acknowledged that to him. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because I was going to ask you too. You talked a little bit about bringing up some of your own fears, and then that can do a dance in the mix with the patients as well. So where do you find for you the challenges? And people, I'm sure when you tell them what you do, they say, one of a couple of things. I could never do that. How can you do that? And how do you manage that? So for you, what challenges are there, and then how do you take care of yourself in the midst of all this?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, they do say that. You're right. They say, "Oh, I'm too sensitive." Oh, I'll say, "Well, I'm insensitive. I can do it." No. But I'll say to them, "Well, I talk to them about the difference between helping and serving, and the difference between sympathy and compassion."
Tell us about that. Yeah, say more about that.
Well, when you help someone, I got her off of welfare. I was able to help someone do this, do that. There's a feeling of satisfaction, and it's lovely. It's wonderful. And there's almost a disparate relationship of one up, one stronger, and one weaker. It's a hand up. It's a helping them up type of thing. And with compassion, you're so grateful to be in there. I mean, before I go to a home, I said, "Oh my gosh, they're inviting me in and putting trust in my knowledge and me as a human being, as a nurse, to go in there and assist them during the most vulnerable time, maybe perhaps of their life."
Wow.
So I look at that as being grateful. I'm grateful to be able to be in there, and it gets rid of that kind of slight arrogance where, he had a great death and it was because I did it so well. It was, we did this together. I'm learning about myself from you. Sometimes I'm the first person crying their eyes out at someone's home, because I'll just witness such beauty, and I hadn't been there in a couple of days, and I'll see someone and my chin will start going, and I'll just go ahead and cry. But Yeah, but the compassion is just very different. It's sitting with the homeless person and realizing that they were a baby once and someone held them and kissed their little nose and cheeks and toes and had dreams for them. You know, that's where I see it different than I'm going to get this person off the street. You know, I learn from them instead, and then use your tools to see what they want and need.
Beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
No, that is wonderful, and you can tell you come at it from that space of, you know, kind of being alongside someone in their journey, not pulling them along where you think you should go. So I get the sense that there's not your own agenda when you go in, and I think that takes practice because, you know, even in the best of scenarios, I know when we care about somebody, even if they're strangers, we want for them to have a good death, one with grace, one without pain, one that might be reconnecting families. And, you know, my sense is that there's a lot of that can happen. So, and I know Misty and I talk a lot about the good death and dying well. Can you tell us about some times where it's not so pretty and it's not so wrapped up so neatly at the end? Or do you see more of a good death?
No, there's many that it's not so good at the end, and we do go in. We have a plan of care that we must administer and fulfill. So we have an agenda, so to speak.
Sure.
But as far as changing a family and a bad death, some of them are just so darn upsetting, because you can tell when someone has that terminal agitation at the end.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
They, for some reason, some people, thank goodness it's not the majority, get very anxious and they disconnect with you. You are unable to connect with them at all, and they seem as though there's something inside of them that is they're so afraid, and they're reacting to, and it's their own. You're witnessing their journey that you can hardly do anything about. I mean, yes, we give the anti-fear and the anti-aggression and the anti-anxiety medications, but there's a certain point where you can't do that, and you just have to sit and witness this. And and they, for me personally, they upset me very much, because I just wish I could. I wish I could just hold them or something, but they're on. It's almost as though they're isolated, and there's a lot of research being done on that. So we'll see what we can do.
But there again, you're still with them, and that's yes. I guess the beauty in that wherever they are, you're meeting that patient where they are, and yes. You're still with them.
Yes,
and realizing when it is time to just stop and listen and observe and learn. And what's striking me is that speaking to a hospice nurse yourself. From my experience in hospitals and of nurses, it's quite medicalized, and it's bringing such a human element to it, and it's so much more than the checking the pulse and the medical things that nurses have the responsibility of doing. And I think that is really shedding light on the whole hospice scene as we've seen in the series. I'm wondering, you spoke earlier in the pre-show about pain and suffering, and that was a really interesting distinction you made. Can you share that with our viewers?
Thank you. Yes, a patient a few months ago, I said to him, I'm feeling so badly that you're suffering with so much pain. And he said, Nina, I said I was in pain. I did not say I was suffering. And so it really inspired me to sit down and think about well, along with all the platitudes that we say all the time, oh my gosh, you hear them all the time, that people mean well, but if you think about them and dissect them deeper, they're really quite unkind at times and making too many broad assumptions. So yeah, pain and suffering is always the same. But and I was thinking about where in my life have I ever experienced pain without suffering. I thought, oh, well, maybe childbirth would be one. You know, it's a hell of a pain, but you're not suffering because you know that hopefully there'll be a great outcome. You don't know, and I don't know, maybe. I mean, I had Botox, that hurt. So I was hoping that was good. It's worn out.
No suffering there. That's good.
My checkbook.
Yeah, so, that more suffering on the checkbook side.
I thought I did suffer, but yeah, it's these things that we just assume go together. I think we could look at those a bit different too, just to see that. So.
Well, it's interesting you say, you know, these things that go together. I think there's a lot of things like that if we sat down and examined, we would be able to find that perhaps our assumptions aren't necessarily so. And what better teaching ground than to be with people who are probably most authentic at the end of life. There's probably not, you know, not too much wanting to be anything but authentic. Can you share with us some? I know you've got 21 stories, and I also did want to mention, I know you mentioned first and last names, and I know when I heard you speak, you also mentioned that those names aren't necessarily their real names, except for a few of them that wanted you to keep their name. So in case anybody's listening and heard you say a first and last name, they're thinking, oh my gosh, there goes HIPAA right out the window. No, these were made up names. So.
Well, HIPAA also, for anyone writing about their medical journeys, is only when you request medical information.
Okay.
And but the lawyer said I have to have between 14 and 16 de-identifiers. So that was pretty fascinating. Just a side.
Oh, interesting.
There. But
well, good. Nobody's taking any chances, and I think that's well guided then. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. What was the question you asked me? I'm so sorry.
The question was about some of your other patients. Did you have? I'm sorry, Misty.
I was just going to rephrase it. It was we're just wanting to hear a little bit more about some of the patients in your book to give us a snapshot into what it might be like to be part of the hospice team and have that experience.
In the book, I speak a lot about there've been a few precepts, a few things or themes that keep repeating themselves over these years. And one of them is the way you live your life, you approach your life, is probably the way you will approach your death. And in one of the stories, Evelyn Masterson, she has ALS, and she was a people pleaser all her life. And she and her doctor figured out she did not want to be resuscitated if she was found without a heartbeat. She did not want to have a feeding tube. And she felt so empowered being able to have this, and then her doctor was going to give it to the family, and she was going to share it with them. But then at the very last minute, when she had a cold and got a fever, they went to the emergency room. Her husband was crying. Evelyn looked, and the doctor said, I see you have signed do not resuscitate order. Do you not want to be resuscitated if this gets worse, be put on a breathing machine if this cold gets worse? And her husband was crying. So being the people pleaser that she is, she reversed her do not resuscitate order. And then all hell broke loose. You know, ventilator, tracheostomy, feeding tube, just horrible. She had a horrible life after that. And so a lot of it is look at the way you approach even a fender bender or something, or a crisis in your life. Did you go into denial? Did you say someone else will take care of it? Did you want to go into all the data that you could, and see whether, and this will probably be the way you'll approach your untimely death. So even Rick, the first story, he wanted to maintain control all the time. So there were so many there are many stories about that reflect that in the book. So but and another thing that you see in the book is don't wait. We talked about that. And that love has many faces. Love can be loud, cursing, swearing, throwing things at each other, but it's so many times it's families with deep love and lighten up on each other. There's so many. You can pluck seeds of beauty out of all the different experiences. I mean, there's been so many experiences where I got the church giggles where I'm trying to have you can't be laughing and my shoulders are going, but because everything is just so dramatic and fun, and and every single family is different, every one of them.
And speaking of that, Misty and I like the idea that death and laughter and lightness can live side by side. Many people don't find that to be true unless they've been in that. And I love when that theme keeps coming out, not only here with you, but with all of our other guests that are very involved with end of life and death. And I don't know if there's any, we love a good funny story. I don't know if there's any funny stories that you have. I don't want to put you on the spot. If you think of any, we'd love to hear them, because I like to juxtapose death with fun. I mean, I've
had some really funny ones. I had one woman, I just thought of her right now. She wanted me to marry her son. she had a son who was a quintessential bachelor, and I went into my first visit. I knocked on the door, and she's a stereotypical Italian old woman, and she has the stockings rolled down, the apron on, and she opens the door, she looks me up and down, and she yells upstairs, "Call Anthony!"
It sounds like it was in South Philly.
Oh man. And I said, "Who's Anthony?" And the brother said, "Oh my God, my mother's trying to get my brother married off." And so I said, how do you know I'm not taken? She goes, "I didn't see a ring on your finger." But her husband made me laugh so hard that the priest was trying to do the sacrament of the sick, the last rites. I was choking, crying, and the priest was choking, crying. So we said, "Let's leave you alone a bit, and we'll continue this later." We went outside in the front lawn, and we were rolling on the grass laughing. I mean, there were so many funny. There were a lot of funny things happen. I mean, oh my goodness, were we laughing? And and some of the patients, you're just like, "How you doing?" They say, "How the heck do you think I'm doing? I'm effing dying here." I just. Who do you think you are? Oh, just funny. And there's a lot of really funny things. Lots of hilarious families. I mean, oh my gosh, they have you laughing so hard. Yeah, dressing up patients and
so you're here to tell us that we don't lose our sense of humor when we're dying or witnessing death, then, right?
No, and I know families are really, really tired, caregivers, but if they can figure out how to just keep it, sometimes they just get things just start getting so hilarious, especially when you've told someone, well, if they don't have anything to eat or drink, they'll probably last 2 weeks. Well, 6 weeks later, you're still going in. They haven't had a thing, and they open a door, and you both start laughing. There's no explanation for it. We said, "Kryptonite? No. Ever ready? Ever funny where that is?" We just start laughing, but it's just they take beautiful care, and they just keep going and going and going. So there's a lot of funny things going. Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
What a lovely.
Thank you. And it's so good to bring that in, and it's really that's what Patty and I are here to do and to share, is that it doesn't have to be this dark cloud following around death and dying. It's just like life, as you said. How you die is how you live. So how we live is not, with this dark cloud around us all the time. The dark cloud can come, but it goes. And as human beings, we have emotions, we have sadness, we have anger, we have joy, we have many emotions throughout the day. And I think you've shared very well that this is just how it's like with death. And as soon as we can see it for all of the beauty of life that it is, it makes it that much easier for everyone involved.
No, sure. I had a little 12-year-old. I'm sorry, a little 12-year-old girl walked in and looked at her grandma's who was dying. Her ankles. She goes, "Mystery solved. I know where I get my cankles from." You just don't. I have hundreds of those kind of stories.
That is great. That is great. Oh my gosh, to be in the midst of that, I love that connection because I always say if you can get them laughing, you can get them crying, then you've got them. And I think we all want to feel these emotions of all over the place, but we don't want to get stuck in any one place. And it's really beautiful what you do and what you share, Nina.
Thank you.
I tell you, it's and for those of us, I've been involved in hospice, but not in a clinician position, more on support or the volunteer side, that kind of thing. And I'm sure as much as we're talking about that those days can get kind of wearing because sometimes your day isn't over when it's supposed to be over, I would expect. And
yes.
That's probably pretty tough. And it's not like when people say, do you take your work home with you? In some ways you really do. You may not be with the patient, but you're there caring for them, even remotely, I gotta believe.
Yes, I've sat up and waken, and then the beeper goes off, or then the phone rings. So you're so connected to some of your patients. Yeah, you have to have a very full life outside of your work, and any work you do. And I just said you have this can just eat you up and take over your heart and your worry. So you must learn from them. You're not learning the message if you're doing that. Not learning the message they want to teach you.
And again, being part of a team makes all the difference in the world. I can't imagine somebody going this alone, and all of these different places of support. And then you guys, I would suppose, rely well on each other and probably have a lot of good laughs and a lot of good tears together.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We definitely do. There's a few stories in the book where I put a very unconventional nurse aide in with one of my patients, and the magic. It shows the magic between the two nurses. How the two of us banter back and forth, and the patient is so happy that someone's there and not feeling sorry for him. And we just, she was like a real Italian mama. She would pinch his cheeks, but she wouldn't even pinch them. She'd go next to them, and you see someone who has the magic of being able to be real without harm. She just couldn't stand not loving him up, and he loved her, and one of his last things he did was mouth the words "I love you" to her. And so yeah, she's just a doll.
Wow.
She's
wow. There's so many little snippets here of greatness and laughter and joy. I can see a book coming, Patty, and if there's viewers out there, send us your stories, because it's so wonderful, and it's not too. There's many grief stories out there, but there needs to be more light stories. And I love the title of your book, Sun to Sun, and I'm sure it's filled with the whole gamut of emotions that we touched on before. And thank you for laying that so lovely on the table. It's a feast that is worthy of everyone to sit down at the table of death and food. Patty and I have talked about this before. It's a strange, mixing of things, but really, it's there's so much there. There's so much there for everyone to enjoy. So before we close up, Nina, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I just want to honor all the hospice workers, those people who serve the dying. They're driving in the snow right now. Their windshield wipers are freezing up. They're in the hot, muggy Everglades. They're all over, and they're just. This is for all of them. I honor you. Good work. Have fun tonight. It's a wonderful group.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, tell us how to get in touch with you. Tell us how to get your book.
All right. You can go to my website, which is ninaangelamckissock.com, and my book can be bought from Barnes & Noble or Amazon, independent bookstores. Hopefully it's all over, and it's being sold all over the world. So I'm thrilled that these stories are getting out, and I'm in shock also that it's it's being received so well too. I'm getting beautiful letters, beautiful, beautiful letters.
Wonderful, wonderful one. It shouldn't
Good.
stay
Thank
just
you.
with you. It should definitely be out there in the world. And we
Yes.
thank you for sharing your
Patient.
time with us today.
Thank you for what you're doing. How courageous is this? What you're doing?
The
My
death
goodness.
checks.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Talking
There you
about
go.
death, dying, and laughing at the same time. Who knew? Who
Yes. Yes. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Take
Well, we
care, Misty.
appreciate
Thank
you being part of our series. This is, I think, a very important series. We want to show people who are afraid of hospice, the H word, as some people call it, as if, and when you said in the beginning of the show, you talked about how some people really turn away from this. We want to show people who actually is delivering this care, because I think when they hear the H word and then they go down that path, they hear, 6 months, that this is all doom and gloom, and we just really wanted to introduce all of those people who have those concerns, who are caring for someone who's dying or someone who is facing the end of life, that these are real humans taking care of you, and don't wait in so many ways if this is something that you're looking towards a decision.
Get on hospice care quicker. You can always leave and get back on again. Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. And Nina, you do personalized hospice care now, right? I think we talked about that pre-show. So if you are in the Philly area and looking for someone to support you in hospice, you can get a hold of Nina through her website. Thank you very much for volunteering your time and speaking with us. And I wish you all the best and have fun out there. You're bringing a wealth of heartwarming service to all you encounter. Thank you.
Thank you, Misty. Thank you, Patty. Take care.